Nia. Thank you all for joining us for the virtual curatorial tour. And we had a very successful opening last Friday, thanks to the artists and the APEC staff and many of our friends and supporters. And today I'm here with the 3 artists presented in the show to walk you through the exhibition using the amazing 3D scan you will see on the screen in a little bit. And since most of the works were newly commissioned by the artists and created right on site in the exhibition space during the 3D installation, so yeah, it has been a really great process to execute our visions by consistently exchanging ideas and collaboratively pushing towards the theme and concept of the show. So we're very excited to share our insights of the show, and we look forward to hearing your questions and feedback at the end. So before we delve into the exhibition, a little background story. So the 3 artists went to grad school together, and they have been in close contact with each other and working kind of alongside each other for many years, which has made the collaboration very organic for this exhibition. And when I was approached by Dan, who I got to know through Nayeon, whom I worked with in 2 exhibitions prior in Chicago, and about this Apex open call, I was then connected to Sadia and very impressed by all their works. And then I identified a very strong thread among their works in narratives such as societal flex, marginalized histories, cultural hybridity and identity, memory, the self and the space. And then I made the exhibition proposal and had been very open and intentional about sharing the space for experimentation, and was very delighted to see what we have put together. So now let's dive into the exhibition and we can show the 3D scan. So when you enter this exhibition space, we are enveloped by 2 large-scaled wall drawings on both sides of the walls and a multimedia installation towards the end of the gallery. So conceptually, a shadow proves that something exists and occupies space. However, when we're thinking about communities that have no seeming existence in society, their unspoken traumas, erased histories, and forgotten memories reside in a shadowless void. So this show, titled If Shadows Could Shine, asks everyone to think, what if we create a shadow for something non-existent? And these shadows could illuminate, giving voice to untold, neglected, and ejected narratives at the edges of our consciousness and within our shared human experiences. So with this question in mind, I'd like to turn to Sadia's works first. So as you see on the left-hand side, Sadia created a large wall drawing titled Looking Out, the Mobile Mosque. It serves as an exploration of ancestral displacement from the construction of the Tarbela Dam in Pakistan in 1974. And that deeply affected Sadia's family, because they were among the 100,000 people who had to resettle in the surrounding areas. And this dam is the largest rock-filled dam in the world and submerged approximately 250 square kilometers of land. So Sadia's inspiration was drawn from this boat tour in 2022. Sadia encountered a mobile mosque crafted from painted and reflective rusted metal by nomadic communities to adapt to fluctuating water levels along the rocky banks of the Indus River. And Sadia described it as an artifact from the future. And their artistic practice has always been driven by a desire to create transient, impermanent works. And they frequently utilize ephemeral materials and mediums, such as the chalk you can see in the background. The chalk as seen in this work depicting the mobile mosque structure, those white lines, and the black paint used for the background, and ink for the mango leaves, which will all be repainted white once the show is over. And these flickering mango leaves, as you can see in the background, especially if you're in the actual space while you are in front of this work, walking left to right, you can see the mango leaves merging and emerging. They are achieved through stencils Sadia crafted. And sometimes Sadia, I think, use those stencils as tools, such as the works you see in this iteration, but sometimes in their previous works, and you see them as objects in the works, which is really amazing. And this mosque marks the third rendition of mobile mosque by Sadia, and with previous installations in Birmingham, Britain, and Miami, Florida. But this one is quite special because compared to the previous two structures, they had more representation of the actual mosques. But this one really places the viewers inside the mosque with the window you see on your right-hand side, offering an outward-looking perspective within an interior space. We'll take a very close look if we can zoom in a little bit to see the window. And you can notice a poppy field in the background. Maybe we can shift the perspective a little bit and see. So because this is scratched on the surface, so it's a little hard to notice. And there's also the relics and graves. There's turned upside down one on the surface. I think it will give you a very intimate experience when you're truly in the space and looking at the work. And as we notice, there's also the maquettes at the bottom of the work. Those are the architectural forms Sadia observed were some childhood objects they incorporated into the wall drawing project. And they are made of cardboard and paper wrapped in white plaster gauze. And I'll give very quick this example on the right-hand side. This one that mirrors this paddle-shaped dome of the Pakistan Pavilion featured in the 1964 New York World's Fair, coinciding with the dam's construction and the submersion of the Sadia's family's village. And overall, this portrayal imagines the mosque not only as a functional structure, but also a conceptual and material departure to comprehend the rootedness of Sadia's family and culture, a symbol of resistance and afterlife. And for this show, how it's connected to the theme, I think it bears witness to vanished landscapes, displaced communities, and even the ecological shifts overshadowed by relentless development. And since Sadia is here with us on Zoom, and especially this is a work that's just created fresh on the wall, and we have been taking some time to really digest and think about questions. And I actually want to ask Sadia about this, the incorporation of the maquettes, because as you see, this wall drawing typically is all like two-dimensional on the wall, but this shelving really gives you this vantage point. You can imagine yourself inside a structure with the shelves you typically can see in the interior space. So how do these elements contribute to the overall storytelling within this exhibition?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, Yi, for that introduction, as well as Nia. I'm also happy to be here, and thank you so much to the staff, Apex, for organizing this exhibit, and of course, to be in conversation with my friends of, several years has been really extraordinary. And I know, Yi, you mentioned this, but this show kind of came together as very much a collaboration, which I hope we'll be talking about. And you kind of can see it. You all can kind of see it here. And I think like that that I guess inspiration of collaboration and friendship is within this mobile mosque. I have been thinking about this mobile mosque since I had seen the actual mobile mosque. And so what that mobile mosque is that it, as Yi had described it, it was made of rusted metal. It it was just, one would say like a tin box on wheels, and it was off the Indus River, and it would move with the water. So would move with the drought of the Indus River as well as the flooding of the Indus River. And so this wall drawing, it's, as Yi mentioned, it is a third iteration in wall drawing form. And so it's really special because all three iterations are on display right now. One of them is in the New Art Gallery in Birmingham in UK. And the second one is at the Frost Art Museum in Miami. And this one is here, in New York City at Apex Art. And so the two previous ones were, the outside of the mosque, as Yi mentioned, and then this one is peering from the inside. But, I like to kind of play with perspectives in these wall drawings because I often play with architectural forms when thinking about the making of the wall drawing. And so right now, it kind of looks like you're looking at the object. The mobile mosque is an object. And then, if you were to stand at another vantage point in the gallery space, which I hope you all get to give visit, it looks like you're looking at a corner. And it's also in relationship to Dan's work, which is diagonally across from the wall drawing. So here you kind of see a corner kind of inverted. And so, speaking about the maquettes, so I started to build this or think about this mobile mosque, building it and making it and thinking about it with what I know. And so I saw the mobile mosque, but then I also thought about, the mosque that my father had built in Corona in the 1980s. This is Corona, Queens in New York City, which is where I grew up. And so my father founded a, mosque with a group of other community members. And he, with the group of community members, approved an architectural plan of this mosque in the middle of a busy street in Corona, Queens. And so the imagination of the Islamic form from the diaspora in New York City in the 80s is something that excited me. And so, and many mosques in New York City and all over the US are just people's homes, or sometimes, specifically in New York City, they're just brownstones that you can just walk into and they're a mosque. And so, Muslims pray in them. And so with the maquettes, I was attempting to do something similar. So I first started with the making of these maquettes, which are, it's a French word, kind of like collage or assemblage. And so it's the meaning of maquettes is it's an unfinished model. And so I often think about the unfinished. Yi mentioned that I used, ephemeral materials, the chalk, sometimes charcoal, even these like cardboard, the maquettes are made of cardboard and plastered gauze, and it's something that is fragile and can kind of disappear over time. And so one of the maquettes on the far right, Ryan, if you can go back to that maquette on the far right, that is modeled after the dome of the 1964-65 World's Fair Pakistan Pavilion. And that World's Fair it was held in Flushing Meadows Park, which is in Corona, Queens. And this pavilion kind of celebrated the golden era of Pakistan at the time. And this is a time when roadways to modernity and the dam building along its rivers, funded by the World Bank, was happening. So this pavilion kind of celebrated that kind of destiny of Pakistan. And so the fair was held at a time when, 64, 65, when my parents were not even formally allowed into the US, which is quite a contradiction. And so, eventually through the work of civil rights activists and the civil rights movement, the Hart-Celler Act was passed in 1965, or it's called the 1965 Immigration Act. And that's when my parents came into the US through that act in 68. And then, so I again start with what I know, and I knew that information. I'm obsessed with the World's Fair of 64, 65 in Flushing Meadows. And so that has often been part of this, building of the mosque. And then also thinking about family information. And I just want to, end with this quote that has been carrying this project. And it's by, filmmaker, theorist, writer Aisha Ariela Azule. And I'll put it in the chat for you all as well. It's, she says, "The point is not giving voice to a silenced past and making the invisible visible, but releasing the past from its pastness and letting it assume the vitality of what has always been there." So this quote kind of carries this project specifically. And I hope that answered your question, Yi.
Yeah, thank you so much for all those additional insights. And I really appreciate that you also mentioned when you were sketching out this wall drawing and you had Dan's work in mind across from you on the other side of the wall. And especially it's when the space is very intimate and we have large drawings on each side and how to synthesize all the energies coming from two very different works. And understanding the interior, how you respond to the space for both of you. That's really great. I think that's the best thing for a curator. The artists are also thinking beyond their works. So I'm going to go to turn the direction to the rear end of the gallery. And so you can see if you are actually in the space from far away, you can already notice those lights coming through this long and narrow cutoff window in the dark. And those are moving images. So you can see something that's constantly changing and leaking the light out of that space. And that really draw you into this installation. And that's created by Nayeon Yang, titled "A Night Visible to the Naked Eye." It unfolds a double helix narrative exposing the obscured struggles of Southeast Asian laborers while challenging notions of identity within Korean society. And Nayeon's installation in this New York location that we're currently looking at encompasses 12 channels. Those are videos and live streams, with 8 monitors set on produce boxes and 2 hung on the wall in the back, and also 2 projected videos flanking the corners of the space. And within this installation, there are 2 sets of videos. So the first set, there are recordings of that showcase the hands of Cambodian migrant workers sorting vegetables in the farmlands of the city Puchon in South Korea. And Nayeon was invoked by the tragic death incident of a Cambodian worker that was left to death in sub-zero temperatures. And Nayeon collaborated with a local activist to capture these videos, shedding light on the labor conditions faced by migrant workers. So I think if you go to the website, you can actually watch the videos that will play live for you. And then the second set of videos comprises a mix of recordings and live streams of secondhand store T-shirts with calligraphy being sold, displayed in Chicago. And meanwhile, unsuspecting shoppers in the Chicago location that's within the art store called Body, located inside the Chicago Cultural Center. And they actually can be observed on the screens. There are 3 screens here that you can see the movements. And they somehow become the participants in Nayeon's surveillance narrative. And the text you see on the T-shirts are excerpts from news reports on migrant workers' traumatic conditions and situations. So, and this installation really challenges viewers to reflect on their roles as consumers, workers, citizens, and foreigners, questioning the layers of frameworks that define our collective identity within the intricate contemporary existence. And so I have collaborated with Nayeon for one other exhibition that had a previous iteration of a similar installation. And to really get into this work, I think this 3D scan captures a really amazing, the overall shot of this installation. And I think there are a lot of thoughts that put into why the installation is set up this way and why there's this very dizzy kind of feeling that you will notice once you really get into the space in person. And I want to have Nayeon to speak a little bit more about what motivated you to explore this theme and how does it intersect with your personal experiences or artistic choices of creating installations using digital mediums.
All right. Hi. Thank you for the question. So how I started this project. Actually, as a first generation immigrant coming to the United States, I went through some of the typical things like, language barrier, visa status, and work permit, etc., etc. So having said that, one of the under table job that I took without work permit was a nail technician. That was 10 years ago. And then actually that job gave me very specific perspectives on becoming an immigrant and the power dynamic embedded in the empathy that was projected on me and projected by the client, the customers. So when I visited my home country, South Korea, then of course I get to experience what it feels like to be a member of the majority. Naturally, my interest in my experience of as an immigrant moves to the immigrant workers living in South Korea, where I can actually vote and have more accessibility to project my voice to be heard. Yeah, that's how I started.
That's great. Thank you so much. And because the first project we did, you also incorporated the live stream that's between a location in Chicago and the location in Seoul. I think for a lot of Korean speakers, and they will be maybe more easily to understand the text, the calligraphy on the T-shirts. And for this installation, maybe a little removed from the understanding for viewers that don't necessarily understand Korean. And how do you envision the viewers for this installation engaging with the textual elements in Korean within the context of this installation?
Okay, for those of you who haven't seen the show or have no access to the text yet, I'm gonna read one of the excerpt that I use for the T-shirts. Actually, the one that you just seeing right there. So the translation goes: the embassy of Nepal, as well as the embassies of the other Southeast Asian countries, face the same situation when workers from their countries die in South Korea. They do not talk about it. they are worried that if they speak about the issue, they may get a reduced migrant workers quota. That would mean less earnings in foreign currency, which is worth more. Journalist Mindo Key pointed that out. As a result, foreign workers' deaths are silenced. So that's the text there. And so basically, let me get back to my previous job. So actually, from my previous job, I learned about how the empathy. Actually, I'm not talking about the sympathy. That's very different from the empathy and sympathy. So empathy works in the power dynamic. So having an empathy doesn't necessarily make you feel or realize your responsibility in a situation. So in this work, my first job was I don't want to give the audience like a path to the sympathy. I mean, not sympathy, empathy. So I divided the audience in two. One, Korean-speaking audience, and two, non-speaking Korean audience. So for the speaking Korean-speaking audience, assuming those are the majority of the audience could be the Korean or Korean Americans, I think they may have more access to project their voice and also be more responsible for those dire situations that migrant worker experience. So I'm call for attention for them to do something. And then for the non-Korean speaking audience, I first of all, I want to ask like why, ask them like think about why the artist use others' tragedy as a source for the sellable or displayable item in artwork. And also, as he mentioned, in Chicago part, there is a T-shirt display that where audience can interact and actually purchase. In this part, I give the audience a role to be a consumer, or to be just an audience. And also this T-shirts can be seen as a product or artwork, or for the donation, actually the 80% of the profit goes to the Migrant Worker Center in South Korea. So that's something. Let's get back to the Korean text again. So those are the method for me to create and also connect distance between audience and then the dire situation, the migrant workers in South Korea. And I think that's it.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's such a multi-layered installation that's also immersive, but also playing this contract between the observer and who's being observed, and especially the role you're playing consciously or unconsciously in this societal environment and this capitalism as well. And oh yeah, thank you, Ryan, for moving the camera to a little further of this installation. And I do want to ask, because we heard a lot of those questions at the opening. So just to give you this scale. So when you approach this installation, when you look at this window, your head is above the window. So the installation really asks you to bend over to be able to see what's inside. You have to look around. And I think Nayeon shared there are many questions asking like what the intention behind the design of this wall. So can you talk a little bit more? I think the audience here, they may get better understanding of this installation.
Okay. Well, there are two parts. The technical part, practical one, is of course about the accessibility for the wheelchair audience, and the second one is going to be the actually the window lower than your eye level is actually invitation for the viewer to be a voyeur, and distanced onlooker. So while I place audience in Chicago as a consumer, so now you get to be a voyeur here. So that's kind of me playing, giving audience a role.
Thank you. And I really appreciate this aspect. I feel like it's need to put in some effort to be able to see this work from the audience side. And now let's turn our focus to the last section of the exhibition. And as you walk towards this large wall drawing, you really find yourself immersed in a landscape with vibrant hues and symbols, and a stark contrast to the preceding artworks by Nayeon and Sadia. And on the wall, you see there are 13 expensive watercolor sheets. And overall, it gives you both a feeling of gentle fluidity, but also very profound stillness, this peaceful quietness in dense this wallpaper creation. And in this latest work, Dan delves into the essence of home and belonging, contemplating the convergence of space and self. And as you can see, at its heart stands a tree of figured citron fruits known as Fosho, or the Buddha's hand in Chinese lore, surrounded by grass shaped from the iris plant. And if you zoom in a little bit, you see this iris coming from the right-hand side, below the mountains, the upside mountains. They're piercing the space, invoke a force from the ancient past. It's kind of like disrupting the quiet landscape with an air of mystery and violence. And also the piercing blue and green eyes, if you can find them on the drawings. There are a few of them. They both serve as gates and surveillance, symbolizing outsiders peering into this intimate realm. And lastly, the floating doors, they're on the right-hand side. They're also floating, detached from any walls, hint at barriers with uncertain passengers beyond. And this new landscape then invented and are filled with imagination and mystery, occupying a liminal space where no shadow is meant to exist. And what's interesting is this work pays homage to the traditional Chinese blue and green shanshui painting palette, while also acknowledging the influence of Henri Matisse's cutout series, embodying a renewed dedication to form and color. And this work's title borrowed from Walter Benjamin's concept of 0 hour. So this is also the work's title, 0 hour. Freezing, meaning the freezing moments in time beyond the linear flow. And this artist really invites the viewers into this space where past and present intersect and perpetually suspended from void contemplation. And Dan's watercolor series, this piece extends from the black and white cutout drawings of the 2020 series to Return. If you turn the camera towards the right-hand side, you'll see those two smaller drawings on the wall. And to Return, that's you see the motif that's like a water well, and featured in both drawings. And also you see this in the larger watercolor wall drawing as well. So it symbolizes the Chinese character Hui, means to return, and visually suggesting a circular motion. and then transforms the character into a pictorial architecture, portraying an introspective landscape within her visual lexicon. And in this series, so from my understanding, then always started with a blank page of parchment paper, and she would delicately sprinkling charcoal dust and ashes to form a gravitational wash to create this effect. And there's a sequence to those works too. The one you see on the left, that's the first scene. You see the night sky with the trees, and some liquid is leaking from the well. And then moving to the second piece to the right, and it's daytime, but with very dusty air. And the well somehow is broken, left this decay on the side, and the trees are gone. There's also the reoccurring, the grass, the plantation you see in the watercolor too. So overall, I think a lot of the references from Chinese traditional paintings, but also the way to approach images, imagery, and imagination and memory. I think she really challenges and expands the Western-centric narrative in history, aesthetics, and contemporary discourse, really inviting a profound contemplation of time, cultural identity, and interconnectedness. So I have always wanted to ask Dan more about the process of creating this wall drawing, and especially for this exhibition. And we have the previous show closed maybe a week before our show had to open, and everything I had to plan ahead of time, and coming from Texas. So can you walk us through of the process of the art making and the creation of this watercolor drawing?
Sure, thanks for that question, Yi. The work on site, the work was designed for this specific two wall in a L shape, and that was a iteration or an expansion from the black and white dust drawing on the right side of the wall. So the mono work came first. It was I think that series was started in pandemic. That black and white dust as a material, and also the symbol of way to return, the Chinese character. So many of those motifs have been done in black and white previously, and when I was envision what kind of work to make for this show, I also know a little bit of the background and the history of Sadia and Nayeon's work, and it makes sense to make a work that both tap into the previous black and white work in the dust or dry powder as a medium, as well as gave a sense of color to contrast the black and white palette as we imagine. So plus I really do want to make a work that is big enough to cover those two walls. So the size, I think this wall plus the L shape right after the door adds to 25 feet linear length, and it's 10 foot tall. I want to create a large scroll where we can walk along with the narrative. Back then, I think I wanted an epic. I was imagining it to be immersive and heroic, but now having the work in front of us, I was joking the other day. I said, I think I was writing Odyssey, but it turned out to be a haiku. So there's something very minimalist actually, which is surprise, but the color and the motif, the tree and the architect, the mother and son, all those moments are imagined for the space. And also the character is important to be part of the configuration because the Chinatown as a nearby setting, I wanted to incorporate this Chinese character, which I've used before, but it make more sense to continue to use it for chances of, potential exposure to Chinese audience.
Thank you so much. And since we were touching base on the progression from the black and white series to this large scale drawing, but they all kind of tied together with this thread of convergence of space and self. So can you talk a little bit more about what personal experiences or reflections inspired you to undertake this exploration? And so how do you translate these themes into your artistic practice?
Oh man. Personal experience, I feel like there's a lot. And I have to reflect on which one to go into. I can make a list of general personal experience from coming over to United States. I think especially the black and white work had a lot to do with COVID. Ryan, if you don't mind, let's look at the black and white work because that's the first stage of the series. So I will go into COVID a little bit. It was during quarantine that this work comes to being, and back then, a specific incident that I recall very vividly was a Chinese author from Wuhan, which is the capital city of Hubei province, my hometown, writing about the outbreak of COVID in Wuhan under quarantine. And this collection of journal later became what we know as Wuhan Diary. It was this very specific one sentence that inspired me to get started. It was that line says, "Every grain of sand of our time, when it landed on an individual, it became the mountain." It resonated with me, that kind of like shift of scale of a grain of sand, a powder, an individual particle, and how in a time of turbulence, it can destroy any individual, any family, or a community. And that shift of scale of big and small, I think, extended a metaphorical pursuit of charcoal dust as a material. And the charcoal dust as a material, with all its connotation, burned, ashes, particle, dry, and that powdery texture made sense with this body of the work. So I think that is maybe one aspect of the answer to your question, is how personal experience, what I see, what I read, and the material connection informs the drawing. And circle back to the large work, Ryan, if you don't mind, to the large scroll in Apex, this site-specific installation. Interestingly, the color came back after we sort of like came out of pandemic, but I don't want to have this connection to be so specifically one-to-one, because I know that's not the case. I just want to use one incident as a way to talk about how in my practice at the end, it's a sense of reflecting our physical and the mental space that immediately have an impact on us. I think that's ultimately how the form fluctuates. Like I hope there's a sense that I'm actually breathing with my work and with the time. Experience such as moving to United States and past working experience, or whether it be pandemic, I think in my work, there's a desire or a need to return to a sense of continuity, and the reference to blue and green landscape Yi pointed out is still, after all, in the sense of looking back in order to go forward rather than leaning on the past. May I just share one more experience? The fossil, the tree, the hand tree, I have to admit there gotta be some influence of the fact that my husband's had a mortuary transport job, and we go on calls and look at dead bodies, and there's sense of nature, architecture, where trees and leaves are really just us. I think I'm that kind of person that just project human forms on everything. So maybe one of the connection contributes to my family.
Thank you for sharing that. I also didn't know about that part of the story.
Yeah.
Yeah, and thank you also to point out the two smaller drawings on that side of the wall, and especially with the usage of dust and charcoal. I think there is some connection between those two drawings and Sadia's works on the other side of the wall. So I think we just did a full tour of this exhibition, and I want to wrap it up here. And I think for this exhibition, working with the space with 3 artists, and there's obviously 3 sections of this space, and we did intentionally stage those 2 drawings on that little wall there to make a continuation of the whole experience. So the artworks are still in conversation, and it also allows you to free flow in this space and to walk around and look around, and hopefully the shadows as a metaphor can accompany our thoughts while you're thinking about the unseen, the untold narratives, and how this exhibition unfolds as a transient interplay, compelling us to question the nature of reality and the elusive relationship between presence and absence. And overall, we really hope this show can serve as a call to introspect and also try to connect and just learn more about ourselves and the world around us. So thank you. We'd like to open up for questions. Any questions for me and the artists?
If also anyone here, feel free to throw them your questions in the chat or your comments into the chat if you don't feel comfortable being on camera. Okay, well, I'll ask one. I guess this is mostly to all of the artists, considering that all of the pieces, well, I guess besides two of Dan's, considering that the majority of the pieces were all newly created for this show, can you give me a little bit of insight of what might have been different for you in terms of your sort of approach to an execution of these works?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Just that since yeah, given that all of the pieces were kind of made here, with this space in mind, with this show in mind, can you talk a little bit more about your approach to making your art and the concepts in regards to like the theme of the show, like being artists in conversation with each other, all of that?
I could start. I have I feel like I most recently, this is like maybe within the last 3 years or so, I have decided to stop making work for shows. Because I want to kind of just continue to make in my studio, and to make for a deadline. I feel like it stops the creativity process for me. And so a lot of my wall drawings, I do, sketch out the wall drawings, and oftentimes I do visit the space just to see, scale, size. So I sketch them out, I test materials. Sometimes I do kind of make a large scale if I have the space to make a large scale, just to see what it would kind of look like, and how pieces would relate to one another. For this piece at Apex, I did make, a taped version of how large it was going to be in my studio at the art lab. And but then, I was making the maquettes, and I kept like, playing around with placement. But when I entered Apex, which I have gone, to Apex for many of their previous shows, growing up in New York City. When I had gone in, it completely changed, because, I noticed like a fixture, or I noticed like, oh, a corner, or, something else. And it really inspired and evoked something different architecturally in the wall drawing. And so I was making decisions with Yi, and also with Nayeon, and then through conversations of, manipulating the piece on the spot, which is so fun for an artist.
For me, I feel like I resonate with what Asaria said, that you can't put the weight 100% in a deadline or a gallery. The practice is a continuous one, and with this opportunity, how I approach it is just that it's opportunity for a work to get large. All the motifs get larger. I made sure some elements are from previous work. I feel like I think of it as really just a mere moment where I get to take. I always wanted to make a large work, so this is the opportunity to do so. But it's also very important to that I'm not only making a large work where the work I had a envision to make and have it stay in the studio. So you got to get out of the studio and live on the Apex wall. And thank you for this opportunity to lend me the wall. For a certain amount of time, because like Sadia said, you can only choreograph how art work or behave to a certain extent. And the moment that it gets stapled onto the wall, it's most interesting that you get to see how that piece of work starting to whisper a different message that you didn't hear, or you wasn't part of the plan. And I keep saying during install that to three of us, I was like, the vibes is different. The vibes is different. I think that's a truly exciting part. And this vibes comes from an audience, of course, but also have Sadia, Nanyang, and Ease gaze in there in the mix. So when you're in the studio, that gaze is 100% potently mine. To be shaken out of that egotistic space is very important. That's how I know if the work have a chance to stand on its own, or it's just pure self-indulgent. It's very important because my work is so introverted. It's very important that I understand the difference between self-indulgent and introverted. So to me, that's the important part.
For my perspective, I think it's actually the apex location is perfect for me, like because one of the reason, let me say, the motif for those screen is actually the Times Square, all those advertisement, like the look at me, those kind of environment. So I was trying to create those kind of busyness, like the visually busy environment, and then and also it is kind of a site-specific element to it, because if there is all Korean reading audience or non-Korean reading audience, then that means this project might work a little, but I think it's not perfectly work. So the New York City and the Lower Manhattan, where the Chinatown is close by, and that's one of the most diverse cities. So yeah, for me, it was like perfect. I'm gonna show this work. And then also in terms of collaborating with other artists, Dan and Sadia, and actually we were talking about this topic, like since I have like a very busy animated videos, and then how I'm gonna work with Dan's Sadia's work, drawing and stencil, which is pretty still and calm. So without like intervening any others environment they created. So but having the wall behind the in front of those screen worked really well, thanks to Ryan. So yeah, and then that's something that I really worried about first, and then it turns out really well. So I'm very happy with what we have right now, and yeah.
Great, thank you so much for answering. If we don't have any other questions, just want to say thank you to all four of you. Great show. I encourage everyone to come in if they're in the New York area. And I don't know if you guys, I'm sure you're always open to questions. We're always open to questions. Just thank you so much for coming. Oh, well, objective opinion, this is one of the greatest shows I've ever seen. That's a very nice comment.
Thank you so much. It means a lot to us.
Thank you. Everyone
Yeah.
else have a wonderful rest of your afternoon.
Thank you, Apex.
Bye-bye.
Bye.